Welcome back to the big issue, and a big welcome also to our TV audience. And as I said earlier, City TV is 3, and as you can see, yeah, we are 3. So those of you who are watching us, thank you for watching us. Thank you for getting us here. Without the audience, we are nothing. So we work for you. So thank you very much, and keep watching City TV as we celebrate our 3rd. We have a gamut of activities lined up to celebrate our 3rd anniversary. We'll be sharing them with you. But we are now on the big issue discussing the novel ruling that came from a human rights court this week in the matter regarding Tyrone Magai and Achimota School, where the court, in a ruling by Justice Gifty Ejayado, ruled that they could go to Achimota School and not cut their hair because they keeping their dreadlocks was a manifestation of their belief. The court also, of their religion, sorry. The court also ruled that they being denied entry was a violation of their right to education. Their being sidelined during the admission process was a violation of their dignity. So these were all very, very profound rulings. But you've heard Kofi on the matter. He says this matter should not even have reached the courts. You've also heard from James Galgan, Nkrumah counsel for Tyrone Magai, who has explained the strategy in going forward with the matter. You've heard from Franklin as well. We'll try and talk to Yaopon, who is a lawyer. But I have Dr. Isaac Kofi Baini, who is the head of distance education, College of Education, University of Ghana, also with us. But 0549 986 996 if you want to get in touch. That's our WhatsApp line, 0549 986 996 and 0550 585832. 0550585832. If you prefer Twitter at City973 is the Twitter handle. The hashtag is the big issue. Send in a message, or you can reach me on my own handle at East Sportsman, Godfred Akutoboafo, and I will gladly read your comments. We're also streaming live on Facebook, City TV Ghana and City973. So you can also catch us there and do share. And you can also watch us later on our YouTube channel, CityTube, CITITUBE. Subscribe and watch. Okay, let me see if I can talk to Dr. Baini now. Dr. Kofi Baini, morning.
Good morning.
Finally, thank you for staying with us on the big issue. First of all, let me just ask what your thoughts are on this matter from conception right down to judgment, and then we can have a conversation about education.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Host, inviting me to speak to this very important issue. But let me make one correction before I proceed. The head of Accra Learning Center, but not University of Ghana Distance Education.
Okay, Accra Learning Center.
Accra Learning Center, what used to be called Workers College.
Yes, sir.
University of Ghana have learning centers, what used to be called Workers College all over the country. Let me know. I'm in charge of Accra Learning Center, a senior lecturer in the
all right,
head of Accra Learning Center, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Your correction is noted.
I'm grateful. As to the Achimota issue and the perseverance, I think much has been said about. The authorities have spoken, the lawyers have spoken, they know the legal terrain, they've spoken in their mind of, they said a lot about the issue. I'm an educator or educationist, for that matter, lifelong learning researcher. For me, the children's education is very, very important. But then Achimota as a secondary school also has its own rules to ensure that discipline is instilled and academic work moves successfully on their campuses. So if at the end of the day, the good judge is telling us that the rules or the laws governing schools are subordinate to that of the Constitution, then so be it. But if it turns out that there are lapses in the judgment given, and then the board of Achimota Secondary School want to appeal to the case or the judgment, then they can also go ahead and do so. But the most important thing is that the children's or the youth education is very, very important, and nothing should be done to truncate their education. All efforts to be brought on board said that the issue get settled peacefully, so that the children can go back to school. I'm aware that one of them is going to school now. I can only pray that if an appeal is going to be made. It should be expedited so that the children's education will not be affected in any way. That's the piece of the piece that I can express on this very issue.
But let me then move a bit, since you're a lifelong educator, as you say, on the concept of education now. I asked Franklin this question, and he was saying, look, in this part of the world, the focus is more on the infrastructure and the harder issues. But we also know education is changing. Student well-being matters. The mental capacity of the student matters. How a student feels when he or she is in school is very important. And so how are we inculcating this in the process of teaching and learning now, here?
Yes, my brother, the host, very important question posed. Currently, as we find ourselves in the global village, digitization is taking hold in all the sectors of every economy. So now learning by distance mode. For University of Ghana, for instance, we bought more into blended learning. People can stay in their home, get connected. We have a platform, a learning platform, a software called Sakai. People can easily get connected to their lecturers, their tutors, have access to their learning materials, have access to assignment tools, whatever tools they need to work on. Everything is available. So today, you get into campus and getting facilities, accommodation, and then learn. Even as I speak to you now, University of Ghana, the program being run now, everything is online. We've even gone beyond the blended learning and brought on board online. So many of the students, be you on main campus, Accra City campus, or learning by distance mode, you are pursuing your program on online. You are using the online, do your assignments, interact with your lecturers, your tutors, get your resources, your learning materials. If there is any scenario put on the what we call the forum or the chat room, you go there and then interact. So that is the approach we've gotten into now. So learning, as you said, has become lifelong. It's not only just going to stay on campus that tells everybody that you're pursuing university education or tertiary education. You can stay in the comfort of your office and have access to learning material. And I believe with time, it will transcend to secondary education. And people will be learning in the comfort of their homes. They will not necessarily have to move to campus before they can tell themselves that they are pursuing secondary education or tertiary education. That's the extent it is moving to now. And in certain jurisdictions, is currently employed. And I know in no time it will get to us.
Thank you, Dr. Baini. Now, James, stay with me. James is counsel for Tyrone Magai. I will get back to you in a bit. But Kofi, since you are also in the education space, this is a question I'm asking, and it's linked with the conversation you and I have been having. It does seem as if we do not really push these things as an agenda, where we've had the fasting issue recently. Some say it should not have become an issue, because if you look at, we had Grants Bowman, who says he teaches in the UK, and prior to Ramadan, they were simply sent advisories from the educational authorities. This is what is going to happen. If you have Muslims in your school, this is what they're supposed to do. And it was as simple as that. Over here, we were debating it. We've had the hijab issue as well, back and forth. And there seem to be several emerging small issues every year in our schools that, as you've also said previously, might not have needed to become really big issues if the Ghana Education Service is within itself, so to say.
I must admit that the issue about the issues emerging in our secondary education sector can be likened to the issues relating to corruption. where because we are growing as a democracy and there's a proliferation of media house, the media is now very, very expressive and expansive, almost 500 media houses in Ghana. You are hearing more and more reports of issues that in the previous era you wouldn't have heard about. So there is a school of thought that the fact that you are hearing more reports of corruption does not mean corruption is increasing. It means that the reportage on corruption rather is increasing. That's how I'm likening the senior high school issue to the issue of corruption. What I want to say is that issues in senior high schools are not becoming too many, no. These are regular issues that have been there. But prior to now, we were pursuing what we call the Millennium Development Goals. And the Millennium Development Goals did not include secondary education targets. So all CSOs, and indeed for government, the focus was mainly on basic education to ensure universal primary enrollment and completion. Until we ended the MDG agenda in 2015, and then started the processes for the Sustainable Development Goals. It is at the Sustainable Development Goal level where we have Goal 4 talking about universal secondary education. Consistent with that, or in pursuit of that, is our free senior high school program. And just opposing the centrality or the importance of secondary education and its universality of access, completion, and enrollment and completion in Ghana to achieving SDG 4, and the priority the free senior high school policy has enjoyed in Ghana. That is why issues that happened on a regular basis without mention are now being brought to the public limelight immediately.
But they're not being settled conclusively. That seems to be the
That is why
problem.
my issue is about how we address them. Because that's why when I hear the issue about floodgates, I say, what is floodgates? It's as if we just started admitting Rastafarian students. It is not true. Because you are not hearing it, does not mean that these issues were not recurring every year in the senior high schools. It is because it is not coming in the limelight because now we are running a policy where every Ghanaian must go to secondary school as much as practicable, free. So it's a priority. The taxpayer knows that, look, about 2 billion of my money is going into a policy every year. So now people are now looking more into secondary schools and asking more questions about secondary schools when previously it was only our basic schools. I keep saying that the most important thing is not about the frequency of the emergence of new issues in the secondary education sector. But the most important thing is how our education service is positioned, how the institution of the genius is positioned and actually not only responds, but acts to prevent or in default or to prevent, or if it fails, responds to the issues as they emerge. I am more concerned about how the genius manages the issues when they come up or acts to prevent it. That's why I'm saying that I would have wished that Achimota never appealed this case. I would have wished that leadership would have prevailed on them. Of course, we know you have the right to appeal. But if everybody should exercise their rights, you understand, you know how society will become. And so I think that most of these issues, whenever they emerge, are great. They are great because they are an expression. They are an expression of our democratic rights. It actually tells that we are advancing our democracy. We are having difficult conversations that previously would have run away from, and it is one indicator of a growing democracy and a growing society. Okay. Society that's able to dialogue over its challenges rather than keep meeting over them, for them to explode one day, it's a great society. But for me, the most important thing is how our education service exercises its authority and its judgments and discretion and over these matters. That is my concern.
And that is the concern I want to push a bit, because I've read a lot of material and commentary where people seem worried by the Ghana Education Service lack of, one would say, agility these days in getting ahead of some of these problems. And one would say, being a modern educational regulator, of sorts. It seems a bit set in its old ways, in a lot of its doings. What is happening there?
To be honest with you, in the past, there was order in senior high schools compared to now. So if you go to the old ways were better ways. Yes. Until the past 5-6 years, I am telling you that there was more order, there was discipline in the governance of senior high schools then compared to now. It was rare in the past to see a senior high school reject the advice of GES. It would be news, I'm telling you. Yes. So perhaps most of this defiant attitude of senior high schools never came to the fore because they never even happened. It never happened. You can ask anytime you have the opportunity of talking to Mr. Ansowa, you can ask him whether there's a history to the recurrence of this attitude of senior high schools rejecting the advice of GES. No. That is why we are concerned that no, as we develop our secondary education system, we are investing more resources into the program because of the free senior high school. At the same time, the governance systems on which these interventions are built on must work and must work well. They must not deteriorate. And so we have so many challenges to solve in this country in the secondary education sector. And I think that one of these challenges should not be the management of schools. That should not be a challenge at all, because government has so much on its plate that how boards manage schools consistent with the directives of the education service or GES or government shouldn't be one of them. The boards, I keep saying that the boards have a mandate to support the Ministry of Education and GES in managing the schools, and not to create challenges for them. Not to create problems for them. They have to help them rather in solving problems. That is how the boards should see themselves, as problem-solving units supporting government to implement its secondary education policy in the secondary schools, and not agencies that are specialists in flexing their muscles, defining their territories, and then engaging in a turf war with the very institution that's supposed to support its implementation of secondary education policy in the school. Maybe we should look at those we appoint to some of these boards.
But it's the government that is appointing this.
The minister, of course, that appoint the chair, and then it's only 2 members that come from the religious bodies in case of mission schools. Majority of them come from the government agencies, the regional coordinating council, the assembly. Government has the power there, and so we expect government to use that power in a manner that will be complementary of government's own policy implementation. I want to create challenges for government.
All right, Franklin Kujo. Franklin, can you hear me? Okay, then let me just wrap up with James Galgan Nkrumah, who is counsel for Tyrone Magai. So, James, can you hear me, sir? James? Well, we seem to be having a bit of a problem. Let me just read a couple of messages that have come through, and then we will wrap up on this conversation and move on. James Jones Adoboy from La says, good morning, Godfred. Achimota could have dealt with this issue behind closed doors. Well, that's what Kofi is saying. Now they have opened the Pandora's box. This could have been avoided. Again, the lawyers are saying there's no Pandora's box to be opened, so don't worry. Christy Kaswa says, this haircut issue is all about how discipline will be maintained in our schools with respect to haircuts. Kindly go around schools and see the type of haircut that the students are wearing nowadays. GS should be careful on the issue. Teachers are going to neglect discipline in the schools. And Kofi, that's something that is a bit of a worry. The response of teachers to this, they seem to have accepted it as a ruling that says we are no longer involved in discipline. How are we going to tell the teachers that this has nothing to do with discipline?
I have always appreciated the teachers' concern from the angle that some of them are genuinely concerned about they being relatively powerless in exacting discipline in the schools. So some of them have genuine concerns. Now, how do we take this ruling and at the same time maintain discipline? Because one of the ways we instill discipline is to ensure that it's a standard haircut. And then what impression does this ruling carry to students in respect of some of the disciplinary measures that we actually implement? But at the same time,
But isn't the ruling clear on that? The ruling is quite clear.
yeah, but immediately you are taking away a chunk of someone's power when the person's responsibility is intact. You expect that change management is always a process that initially people will become apprehensive and uneasy. You understand? Let me give you an example. And they become apprehensive and uneasy because of the genuine concern they have in respect of exercising their responsibility. 2 years ago, I keep saying 2 years ago, we sat in City TV studios here and discussed 3 years ago and discussed the introduction of positive discipline and the ban on corporal punishment. Teachers said that we cannot teach. Without the cane, we cannot teach. The school should go ungovernable. We heard that. For the past 3 years, which school has become ungovernable? Have teachers not been able to teach for students to pass and pass well without the cane? So you see, it's a human issue. In every human institution, when change becomes, okay, the process of adopting change is not always smooth. There's always the apprehension because everybody is always used to that. It's an order. And so the change management process will have to be facilitated by the GES, the employers. They have to manage this transition. It is very, very important. So teachers, being a key stakeholders in the education delivery process, will not only adopt, but then they will not only adapt, but then they will adapt this new this culture of inclusion, quote unquote, within the context of the ruling, so that they don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. Because we go to school not only to build the cognitive or the cognitive aspect, but also the affective aspect is very, 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 very important. Let me conclude by saying that as the students have gone to school, we are all happy. I am very, very happy, and I'm always confident in the professionalism of the teachers in Achimota and any other school to comply with the ruling of the courts. Indeed, I believe that, and I know many teachers in Achimota who are happy that the case has ended, and that who are happy the students are on campus. Most of them even believe that the case should have gone to court. So the impression that the school will be a hostile one, there will be animosity, and then there will be vindictiveness, I can assure them that it will not happen because the teachers there are very, very, very professional. What I want to add is that I am informed that next weekend, track green, Form 1.
Green track.
They will vacate.
Next week?
Yes, track green has been in school for 11 weeks. So they have 1 week to vacate. Okay? Now, track gold has been in school for 6 weeks. So they have 6 more weeks. Everybody is doing 12 weeks. So track gold will go to school on the 18th of June. As they have been admitted on Thursday or on Friday, and I'm told one actually participated in the exam. That is the end of sem exams for track green.
How has that been possible?
Exactly. So I don't want to believe that they have been enrolled in track green, even though it's obvious. But I am pleading with the Achimota authorities and education service that if they are admitted in track green, it will be a disadvantaged admission because they would have been admitted in the 11th week of a 12-week semester when they have an opportunity of being admitted in the 7th week of a 12-week.
Well, the cynics will tell you, well, you wanted to come. This is how you will come.
That's why I started by saying that I believe in the professionalism of the Achimota teachers. And I believe that they will always seek the best interest of the students in applying the ruling. And that is why it is in the best interest of the students to be admitted on
gold track.
Gold track. So they will come to school on the 18th of June and have another 6 weeks of instruction before they end their semester. As for track green, it is only 1 week to 8.
Let me talk to Lawyer Nkrumah on that. James, can you hear me? James Nkrumah. Well, we seem to have missed out on James Nkrumah, who's the lawyer for Tyrone Magai. It's an interesting question. But Franklin, can you hear me? Hello, Franklin. Well, it does look like technology is not helping this morning, but let me take a couple more messages. So, Xylix Dwayne says, I'm really happy for the kids and their parents for standing their ground. Thanks for testing the system. Democracy wins. That is from Xylix Dwayne. Also, coming through. James from Sunyai says, the ruling is okay, just that I feel the content of the ruling must make this an exception rather than the rule in order not to open the floodgates in abundance and cause the rain to shine upon us. Well, if you've been listening to Kofi and myself this morning, there's no floodgates to be opened in this matter. No. You see, because I think, Kofi, the basic understanding of a lot of people is, okay, then students will start making up reasons just to show up in school and not to conform. But I do not think we live in that kind of society yet. No. And even then, you will still have to make a case as to why you should be allowed to do ABC.
There's a test that particular act, because per the rulings, not only in Ghana but all the African countries, it's clear that for every act to be upheld or to be permitted in the school, you understand, the act must pass the test of whether it is an expression of a fundamental
human right,
religious right in this case. Okay, and then you ask the question: is the act a mandatory religious practice? You understand? Because they are not all acts are mandatory in Christianity. So is it a mandatory religious act, and is the act an expression of religious beliefs? Okay, and then there's a question about the public order, public interest matter. Yes, the law and the judgment as given by the judge, for instance, would not allow someone to walk to school barefooted because it will not be in the interest of the person claiming the right to walk barefooted, because a thorn can hurt the feet.
You get an infection.
So your right can be constricted because the enjoyance of that right would have a negative effect on you, the person, and secondly, a negative effect on the society. So you cannot walk barefooted to school. You cannot walk barefooted because it is not good health-wise. So the restrictions to the enjoyance of this rights, there are principles upon which restrictions will be made. They are already established, they are there. And so I don't see the floodgates being open.
And also, frankly speaking, I think a lot of people assume that there's no common sense in the practice of other faiths.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, but there's a lot of common sense in the practice of other faiths. Exactly. The fact that somebody goes bare chest during the day does not mean that when it is cold at night, the person won't put on a shirt simply because it is their religion. And there's a lot of common sense application.
And there was an interesting quote by the judge referencing the old high school case, the Kenya case.
Read that one.
And he said that this is the Kenyan court. He said that where genuinely held religious beliefs clash with school rules, both sides must strike a balance between religion and education for the good of the learner and the institution. Now, underline this one. He says that school rules must appreciate genuinely held religious beliefs and should not be applied as though they are superior. So school rules must appreciate genuinely, underline, genuinely held religious beliefs. It's not just any religious belief. And in other traditions, they say mandatory religious practices. So the way fasting or Ramadan is a mandatory religious practice in Islam. Like going to church on Sundays is mandatory in Christianity. And those who belong to the Abrahamic faith, the Rastafari, is mandatory not to cut your hair or maybe recite your psalm. They are mandatory practices. And I did West Africa traditional religion. There is no mandatory practice in the BATR that says that walk barefooted or walk bare-chested. Those are all extrapolations that will not help our discussion. Yeah.
Okay, so that is fair. And I recall a period where I was in secondary school and one very powerful chief died, and there was a regent who was a student, and he was allowed to manifest
his cultural rights.
His cultural rights, yes.
Exactly.
In school.
It wasn't every day, right? It was
it was like a week or so, and then it was done.
Exactly.
So we were just told that stay out of this person's way. This person is doing this. Don't be surprised to meet this person here at this time. That was it. And then you move on. Anyway, Emmanuel from Cantonment says, go and make yourself proud, Rasta. There's no barriers, only human creation. Joseph from Accra says, good morning. For me, the basis of what the parents are stressing at the point that the point that a Rastafarian must wear dreadlocks is not true. Why in the so-called home of Rastafarian religion has banned dreadlocks wearing in schools? Well, Joseph, that is not true.
Where's the home of
But Joseph, that is not even true. I think this emanates from that very popular New York Times article that came out during the height of this case. But a lot of people just read that article without actually following the entire case to the end. So Joseph from Accra this morning, Jamaica has not banned dreadlock wearing in their schools. There are a lot of schools that have.
And again, people also think that Jamaica is Rasta people. Rastafarians in Jamaica are less than 2% of the population.
Yes, of the population, yeah.
So this is a religious minority by any stretch of definition in any country.
Yeah.
And that is why I keep saying that democracy is not just about majority rules,
yes.
it's about minority rights.
Yes. Yeah. Jimmy Cliff was asked why he is not wearing dreadlocks. He answered, Rastafari religion is not about hair culture. This is what Jimmy Cliff said. Morgan Heritage Association says, don't have to dread to be a Rasta. It is not a dreadlock thing, but a divine conception of the heart. Well, have you met Gramps Morgan? He has very Gramps Morgan, who is the leader of Morgan's Heritage, has very long locks while singing that song. But anyway, that's just by the way. Christine Kaswa says this haircut issue is all about how discipline will be maintained in our schools with respect to haircuts. Kindly go around schools and see the type. Okay, I've read this message that has come through. So yeah, these are the messages that I can have. Two more. Okay, I will wrap up with James on one issue and then I will move on. Godfrey, the ruling on the Rasta issue makes me feel proud to be a Ghanaian again. I was certain that such an issue would arise in a modern country like Ghana. It is appalling that Achimota school could display such a narrow worldview in their admission policy and seek to impose it. I'm glad the kids won the right to go to school. From Nimose in London. Allison says, in Ghanaian public schools, girls are not allowed to cover their heads to class, but Muslim girls are because it is done in regards to their religion. Then why are Rastafarian kids not allowed to keep their dreadlocks in school in regards to their religion? This is discrimination. James, let me come to you so that we wrap this up. And Mike, Kofi Asare here raises a fair point about the time of admission. Is that a worry for you? Is that something that you will look to address for your clients?
Yes, I think that now that we have two streams of education in the secondary school, I think in the interest of the children, it will be proper for the school management to allow them to join the second batch. Otherwise, they have been in the house. They have done some private studies on their own. But I think that it will be proper that they join the subsequent batch so that they can properly prepare and sit for the examination.
And let me just ask this before I let you go. On a personal note, as a lawyer, how does it feel being a part of something like this?
Well, it's all about constitutional rights. I think that the good thing about this case is that it has asserted or emphasize the fact that we are a growing democracy and we need to tolerate each other. I'm happy to be a part of this case, and the commendations are great. It's a great legal team that did the work together just to ensure that, once again, constitutional rights is upheld. We are really grateful for the support that we had from well-meaning Ghanaians for the prosecution of this case.
All right, then. Thank you very much, James Galgan, Nkrumah, Counsel for Tyrone Magai, for spending time with us on the big issue this morning. Let me just wrap up this topic with two more messages from Twitter, and then we can talk about the culture of silence, which, according to the president, does not really exist in his Ghana. We'll find out what is happening there. So Kia Mofa on Twitter, tweeting on that, Kia Mofa says, at what point does a religious belief become a genuine act to be backed by the law? Mofa, I don't think your message is too clear. He says, who sets up the religious beliefs that the courts will uphold? This is also not clear. Okay. So Kia Mofa, this, I guess we'll just leave your questions hanging. And also it says the judgment should also have stated the limitation of the freedoms granted. The cutting of hair by all students in the school has served its purpose. I'm sorry, but your message is quite ignorant. Let me leave it at that. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Fellow Ghanaian content creators, the Bet Planet Creators Cup competition is here. How well do you know about betting on Bet Planet? This is your chance to win 10,000 Ghana cedis in cash. All you have to do is to come up with your own creative video content speaking on betting on Bet Planet. Upload your video content on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Use the hashtag Bet Planet Creators Cup and tag at Bet Planet Ghana to participate in this competition. At the end of each month, from the 1st of June till the 31st of August 2021, Bet Planet will be rewarding the most creative video entry with 10,000 Ghana cedis each month. Yes, 10,000 Ghana cedis. Join the Creators Cup competition now. Dream, create, and win with Bet Planet. This advert has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Bet responsibly, not for persons below the age of 18 years.
A lawful wedded wife to having to hold from this day forward.
I do.
I knew it.
Drama saying a bit mashe. I'm a winyaji. For HD Plus, who no feely. My HD Plus, nyanyon papa palma with HD TV. For star 879 hash for subscribe it. Not chow need to feely say see ya.
Welcome back to the big issue, and we are moving on to our second topic for the morning, and this is regarding the president's address at a gathering of journalists that was somewhere on Monday, where he finally spoke about the culture of silence that apparently was prevailing within the country, and this was born out of Sir Sam Jonah's address to a Rotary Club meeting some time back. Well, the president finally spoke about it. Now, if you listen to Sir Sam Jonah, he said it did look like, in his estimation, that a culture of silence had returned to the country and that was prevailing, and that journalists were not able to work freely. The president chose his own platform to respond, and he said that he has strongly rejected the perception that there's a growing culture of silence. So we will play back two reports to show his reactions. One was on Saturday at the University of Cape Coast, and then also on Tuesday when he addressed the African Association of Journalists gathering in Accra.
At the special congregation in honor of the president was Chancellor of the university, Sir Sam Jonah, who recently had cause to speak against what he described as a growing culture of silence. For President Akufo-Addo, his government has rather been at the receiving end of attacks. He says response from his appointees to such attacks cannot be termed as a culture of silence.
That when people in government and all government policies are criticized, and there is a defense of the people of policies, it is intimidatory and leads to a culture of silence. A radio station is currently running a campaign against free SHS. During the last election, I got the clear impression free SHS had been endorsed by all political parties, and all we needed to do was to keep improving it. Would a spirited defense of the free SHS policy constitute an attack on press freedom? I wonder. It cannot be that everyone has a right of reply except members of the government and officialdom. Nor can it be that challenging an opinion expressed by a journalist constitutes an attack on press freedom. What I believe may be sorely lacking in our society today is the need to listen to each other more. Knowledge has never been a gift granted exclusively to one group.
Ghana's global ranking on press freedom and safety of journalists has dipped in recent years, according to Reporters Without Borders, making Ghana lose its status as Africa's best-ranked World Press Freedom Index. While expressing regret over the lack of prosecution of the killers of investigative journalist Ahmed Swaleh, the president argued that not all journalists are upright citizens, hence institutions must deal with any erring journalist according to law.
It remains a matter of great regret to me that the murder of Ahmed Swaleh has still not been resolved. But believe me, this is not for want of commitment on the part of the police. And I couldn't have made it any clearer that government has no interest in covering up whatever might be or whoever might be involved. There is no indication that his death was at the instance of the government. In the end, his murderer will be caught, tried, and punished. And there are unfortunately several journalists that have been willing to lend themselves to the destruction of people's reputations and livelihoods without just cause. Not all journalists are upright citizens, just as politicians, painters, and farmers are not all upright citizens. But I do expect our institutions to deal fairly and equitably with all citizens according to the dictates of the law when people go wrong. Let me end by addressing a particular line of the current argument being made about the threat to rights and freedoms. I believe this has led to a new definition of a culture of silence. It goes along the line. That when people in government and all government policies are criticized, and there is a defense of the people of policies, it is intimidatory and leads to a culture of silence. A radio station is currently running a campaign against free SHS.
In recent times, some police officers have been accused of perpetrating crimes against citizens, a situation that has raised concerns over the deteriorating state of security under the watch of President Akufo-Addo. But the president has discredited such concerns, touting investments made by his administration to improve on the state of security.
In addition to increasing substantially the numerical strength of the police service, government has since 2017 procured some 735 additional vehicles, including 15 operational buses, a feat unprecedented in the history of the service. It must be put on record that before I came to office in 2017, the police service had a total of 492 serviceable vehicles. Government is determined to give whatever support is required to ensure that we have a police service that the people of Ghana deserve.
Contrary to opinions that quality education has been sacrificed for access under government's free SHS program, the president insists that quality has been enhanced with improved access to education in his government.
Not only has access been widened, but quality has also been maintained. Indeed, even enhanced. Government is also ensuring that access to tertiary education is expanded through the removal of the guarantor requirement that makes it difficult for some students to apply for loans through the Student Loan Trust Fund scheme.
The conference saw journalists from over 30 African countries gather in Accra to trade ideas on how best to make the profession more relevant. The Federation of African Journalists, which organized the event, says they considered Ghana as one of the safest countries in Africa to practice journalism, hence its decision to host the event here. President Akufo-Addo, who opened the conference, says government will do all it can to improve journalistic practice in Ghana. He says recent attacks on journalists in the line of duty must be condemned by all, adding that Ghana's democratic credentials do not support such acts.
The decision to select Ghana as this year's host is because of, and I quote, the conducive environment for media practice generally, and particularly for her impressive ranking, second in Africa on the latest World Press Freedom Index, unquote. Our aim is to be number one on the continent, and we will work hard to ensure we attain this. A day like this, it is also important to consider some of the emerging challenges to media freedom. One of them is what constitutes an attack on media freedom. It cannot be right, no matter where in the world the journalists are physically attacked or prevented from doing their work. Once that happens, it is an attack on media freedom, and it must be roundly condemned by all. As George Orwell rightly puts it, and I quote, "Freedom of the press, if it means anything at all, means the freedom to criticize and oppose," unquote.
Information Minister Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah charged journalists to weed out persons who use the profession to pursue personal interest.
One of the biggest threats to journalism is the infiltration into the industry of persons who use journalism as a cover to practice all sorts of unethical, unacceptable acts that are known to our industry. It must be of interest to us and our leaders in the industry to constantly set the standard on what is ethical and acceptable, and be quick to uphold same while calling out boldly, without fear or favor, that which is not journalism but masquerades as such. If not done by we, the journalists ourselves, and our unions, it sets the stage for others to take us on and by effect undermine what is true journalism. The African proverb is that one nut not taken out sours the taste of the entire nut gel.
The president of the Federation of African Journalists, Salah Ahmed, says journalists in Africa should use their various platforms to churn out positive stories about the continent.
When we speak about news, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, sadly, the mindset is always about bad news. It's about conflicts. It's about problems. It's about disputes. And without that, maybe...
So that was Salah Ahmed, President of the African Journalists Association, wrapping up that report. And you heard the president basically sharing his thoughts on what he deems to be the state of journalism in the country, the idea that there is a culture of silence prevailing that he outrightly rejects based on his track record and the current practice in the country. And then you heard Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah as well, who's talking about the infiltration of journalism by elements who are using it for their own benefit. So that is where the conversation stands. And I'm going to get into this phase of the program with the Member of Parliament for Tamale North has joined us. The Honorable Suhini is with us. Franklin Kujo is still with us. And Muhib Saeed is Manager of Expression at the Media Foundation for West Africa. He has also joined us. So I guess I will begin the conversation with Muhib and then talk to Suhini and then Franklin. Muhib, good morning. Thank you for joining us on The Big Issue. Muhib, can you hear me? Okay, we'll get to Muhib in a bit. Honorable Suhini, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So Muhib has joined us. He's Manager of Expression at the Media Foundation for West Africa. Muhib, good morning.
Good morning.
So quite the spirited defense of his track record as president and his basic rejection of the idea or the notion that there's this culture of silence that is prevailing in Ghana at the moment. What did you make of the president's defense? It's been a while, but he finally spoke about this.
Hello?
Yes, Muhib.
Yeah. I didn't get the last bit of your presentation.
Yes, my question was, what do you make of the president's response to the notion that there's a culture of silence prevailing? We heard this when Sir Sam Jonah spoke about a month or so ago. The president chose his own time to respond. What did you make of the response?
Thank you very much. I think in the first place, I would like to make an analysis of the president's address, especially in respect of the claim that Joy FM, well, he didn't mention the name, but we all know that it was in response to a program that has been running on Joy FM regarding the free SHS. And the president actually called out Joy FM and said that they are running a campaign against the free SHS. That's to us at the Media Foundation for West Africa is intimidatory, because for a whole president to call out a media station and say that the media station is waging a campaign against a major social intervention policy is to indirectly point out that that media station is anti-public interest and anti-government. And within the context of the conversation about the shrinking space for expression by the media and civil society, I think that that was quite a low point in the address of the president. Again, the president said that it appeared to him going into the elections that all stakeholders agreed that the free SHS policy was a good one, and that it needs to be tweaked to perfection. That is an admission that not all is well with the free SHS, and that it is not a finished product, but work in progress. Now, if it is not a finished product, but work in progress, then it certainly has certain challenges which need to be identified, discussed, and addressed. And I think that was what Joy FM was doing. And for the president to decide that it amounted to a campaign against the free SHS, to me, was an act of intolerance. Because if we agree that the media is independent and has the latitude to look at whatever problem from whatever angle, then Joy FM were within their rights to decide that they were focusing on the challenges of the free SHS. And I thought that the president should have appreciated what Joy FM was doing in that light, in that spirit, and also offer or let its government respond by way of showing what is being done to kind of mitigate the challenges that Joy FM was highlighting. Now, the whole debate about whether or not there is a culture of silence, perhaps the word or the expression used is what we may not be able to agree on, but I believe that we can agree on the fact that the press freedom environment in Ghana has somehow deteriorated over the past 3 years. We will recall that a year into the administration of the NPP government led by Nana Addo, Ghana was voted the top country as far as press freedom in Africa is concerned. We were 23rd on the global stage. The next 3 editions, or the subsequent 3 editions of the ranking, have seen Ghana move from 1st to 3rd and from 23rd to 30th. That is a clear indication that the momentum that had been gathered over the years, culminating in our being top in Africa in 2018, is gradually being lost. And we would also agree that there have been so many attacks on the media that is quite unlike Ghana. Now, if anybody read the headline that armed security officers stormed radio station in search of a journalist, if anybody heard that a journalist arrested by national security and tortured, we have about 54 countries in Africa, but I'm sure that if anybody was given 40 chances to guess which country is being talked about without Ghana being mentioned, I doubt if that person would ever mention Ghana in the 40 chances, because we have over the years built a tradition of upholding press freedom and being tolerant of each other's views. And so I believe that it's got to a point where we have to admit that things are not as good as they used to be. And so on the basis of that admission, we can sit and dialogue and find common grounds as to how we can all help to promote freedom of the press and of expression in Ghana. This will be my preliminary remarks.
Okay, now on the matter, Muhib, of the first part that you mentioned, for instance, where you said that you felt the president's response to by mentioning the programs that were held regarding free SHS, for instance, on Joy FM, would it be okay for somebody to say, well, perhaps he can talk about fair critique as compared to a campaign of sorts? Don't you think so?
Hello?
Yeah, Muhib, can you hear me? Hello, Muhib.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, I was saying that with regards...
Yes, I got you. I got you. Of course, as I said, the president also has the right to respond. But this was a very big platform, and the president is calling out a radio station and accusing of running a campaign against the free SHS. To me, we have seen so many instances of political party militants attacking media organizations and journalists for their work, which is perceived to be anti-government. And so for a president that is minded to prevent those kind of attacks, if you put a media organization on the spot and accuse it of running a campaign against a social intervention program that is doing so much for the people of this country, then you are inciting the public against that media organization. You can respond and say, the Joy FM have raised a series of issues about the free SHS, and then you respond to it. But it was clear that the president was a little irritated at the program that Joy FM was running.
All right, thank you, Muhib. I'll get back to you now, but let me talk to Alasan Suhini, Member of Parliament for Tamale. Honorable Suhini, good morning.
Well, good morning, Alfred.
Quite the defense put up by the president of his track record when it comes to press freedom, and it does seem like that mention of the prevalence of a culture of silence really irked him, because he, on two different platforms within the same week, he mentioned it. Although the statement was made about a month or so ago, he spoke about it on Saturday and then spoke about it again on Tuesday.
Well, Godfred, I agree with you. Let me say good morning to my colleagues on the set. Good morning, Frank. Good to see you, and good morning. Right. Let me also say hi to the very good people of the Tamale North constituency.
Yes, correct.
Godfred, I think that you are right about the fact that the president may have been egged by incessant, insinuations about the return of culture of silence under his watch. And his reaction simply doesn't help matters at all. First of all, the fact about how media freedoms are attacked under his government are established. And my brother Muhib did make reference to the records, and just to highlight, Ghana has moved from first in Africa to third as far as media freedom ranking is concerned. We have moved from 23 to 30 globally. So that is established. The fact about how media freedoms have been attacked under his watch is established, and it is beyond debate. It is not just in the litany of actions that his agencies and the overall and his appointees have carried out, either against media houses or media personnel. It is in established data that showcases how we have slipped as far as media freedoms are concerned. So that is beyond debate. Now, the president's reference to a campaign against free SHS is perhaps one example of how his attitude and his approach personally perhaps may have contributed to this insecurity that many media houses and media personnel feel under his watch. Because clearly his pronouncements is a betrayal of how he may be encouraging appointees of his and members of his government and his regime to see every criticism of the regime or its policy as a campaign against the regime. And the president has to understand that a criticism of a policy is not a campaign against this regime or the policy. If we understand that no policy is foolproof, no policy is perfect, and if we are to take his words that we should become citizens and not spectators seriously, then it beats my imagination that the president will reduce a criticism of a policy to a campaign against the policy. Very, very myopic, very, very pedestrian. And perhaps it is fueled by a certain arrogance that he is beyond reproach. He is beyond criticism. He cannot make a mistake, and things cannot be done better than he has, implemented it. That is messianic, and that is dangerous. That is how despots are created. Read about dictators around the world, and that is how they are created. And that, for me, is, very loud when it comes to how he subtly may be behind all these very bold attacks on journalists and media houses who, one way or the other, have criticized a policy or a decision of government. According to the president, a criticism amounts to a campaign against either his regime or his policy. And for a Democrat to have that kind of understanding, it is dangerous for the future of democracy in this country.
But Sweeney, isn't he allowed the right to interpret it the way he sees it? Somebody might see it as a criticism. He sees it as a campaign.
Please, at least I have watched some of the discussions that have been conducted by not just Joy FM, but even your media house on the need for us to look at some of the things that are going wrong with free SHS. I followed your discussion, for example, on the feeding component of the free SHS and the importation of, sardines and others, vis-a-vis the need to use that as an opportunity to help, create local consumption and help local production. I followed that discussion. How does that amount to a campaign? How does, getting parents who have wards in these schools, to tell their stories of how difficult it is and how better it can be made, getting GES and NAT and others to all share their experiences of, a free SHS in the last 3 years and how it can be made better, amount to a campaign against free SHS. And like I said, the president's mindset is dangerous to our democracy. The president needs to be reminded, and perhaps we didn't do it enough when he went on the campaign of free SHS, when President Mahama at the time drew his attention to the fact that the Constitution of Ghana requires that free SHS, be implemented. I think the president, because he hasn't been reminded enough about the fact that this is a constitutional provision long before he made it a political campaign issue, is thinking that it is his heavenly idea to save this nation. And so nobody has the right to contribute to its improvement. He is doing it the best way it has been revealed to him by God. And that is how dictators and despots think. But if perhaps the president is reminded that it was a constitutional provision long before he made it a campaign, a political campaign issue, he will understand what is required by every citizen and by governments, not just his government, to make it impactful, to make it more meaningful to the people of Ghana and by extension, the development of this country. So clearly, I think that the president's remarks were not a fair response to the issues that have been raised as far as the problems with the running or the implementation of free SHS is concerned. It is, for me, a betrayal of how subtly he has been encouraging his party folks, his appointees, to see every criticism as a campaign against his government and his regime, a campaign that needs to be clamped down, a campaign that needs to be squashed, whether by brute force, by threats, by intimidation. And that is why we have a tall list of media houses that have suffered these attacks from government appointees and agencies. That's why we have a tall list of journalists that have suffered these attacks under his watch. And that is why it has resulted in Ghana slipping from first position in Africa to third position, and from 23rd position globally to 30th position. And it is time he wakes up to smell the coffee.
But in fairness to him, Suhini, he does make reference to the fact that, look, institutions have been strengthened, resources have been provided, the judiciary has been strengthened, infrastructure has been provided for NCC, all agencies that are supposed to protect the press have been strengthened. And in his estimation, if you look at his history, very few people have fought to provide and create this environment of press freedom that we all enjoy. So he takes it quite personal when somebody says that it is under him that a culture of silence is prevailing. In fact, he does make reference to the passage of the Right to Information law as well as proof of his commitment to ensuring an environment where people can speak freely. And he does also make a commitment to perhaps better protection for journalists in the carrying out of their duties. Don't you think that is him showing some, one would say, some sincerity perhaps?
You know, maybe the president's history of posturing as a friend of the media and a campaigner for, the advancement of human rights is what makes what is happening under his watch as president even more disturbing. Because for me, it sends a signal of a man who has been pretentious for the most part of his adult life about what he believes in. Because one would have thought that having led or taken part in demonstrations that sought to advance press freedom and the respect for human rights under his watch as president, you will be experiencing better. But when you have a situation like I have said, where the facts have established, research has established, and it's no longer a debate, that media freedoms under his watch have come under severe attacks, then it makes it quite worrisome. And it presents to you the notion that perhaps this is a man who, for the most part of his adult life, has pretended just to get to the top, job of being president of the Republic of Ghana.
But Suhini, that would be some pretense, considering he's done this for a very large chunk of his adult life.
Well, but then now, like, what is the name? Michelle Obama will say, he gets revealed by the presidency, because she says, for example, and I agree with her, that the presidency does not change who you are. It actually reveals who you are. So as president, if we are seeing him supervise, things that he preached or stood against when he was in opposition, then it reveals the true character of the man that was, perhaps shielded for a very long time. But when he talks about institutions that have been resourced to carry out their jobs, he fails to talk about how the NCA has been goaded on to unfairly and, discriminately shut down media houses that are considered to be critical of his regime. He fails to talk about the empowerment of a national security standby force that is used to intimidate journalists like your own colleague, Kalib Kuda, like the modernghana.com journalists who were made to stand upside down on their hands and whipped at the national security. He fails to talk about these aggravated attacks championed by agencies under his watch against media houses and journalists. He also fails to address the general concern that media practitioners are threatened and intimidated every now and then in the course of their work, especially when they are not saying what is pleasant. Clearly, it is as if media freedom in this country is now reduced to, or free speech, I should say, free speech is now reduced to pleasant speech. If your speech is not pleasant, then according to the president, you are waging a campaign against him, and anybody naturally will want to crash a campaign against him or what he believes in. So when the president carries on with that attitude, he's simply inviting people to crash any, speech that may be free but not pleasant. So freedom of speech is, changed to pleasant speech. If it is not pleasant, it shouldn't be tolerated by the government and its apparatchiks. And Godfred, you see, when you speak of what the president did in the past, all the agencies he speaks of, SHRAJ, the National Media Commission, and others, remember, were all established, not even just resourced, but established and supported under the regime that he taught and led campaigns to establish was against media freedoms. So whether you increase budgetary allocations to them or not is not the question. But what you allow them to do, and I've just talked about how NCA and the national security may have increased resources and increased logistics, but to what end are they using those logistics? To promote media freedoms or to, attack media freedoms? So, though the existence of those institutions did not convince Nana Addo when he was in opposition under Jerry John Rawlings that the mere existence and workings of those institutions guaranteed media freedoms. So he should not expect us to take it that because he is president today, the mere existence and workings of those institutions guarantee media freedoms. It cannot be.
All right, then. Thank you, Suhuyini. I'll get back to you in a bit. Franklin?
Yes.
Yes, I am sure when the president spoke on Saturday and Tuesday, you're like, finally.
Well, yes, the president chooses his moment when he wants to respond to things he doesn't like or doesn't appreciate. Sometimes it takes more than a month. So we are grateful that he did eventually. Look, it was President Abdullah Wade of Senegal at some point who said that for him, his most favorite advisors are the voices of the opposition. But the opposition here is not only limited to political opposition, but also to persons who offer different opinions about how things are, how governance is being conducted in his country. Well, he has his own issues. He had his own issues as well. But our president, obviously is one person who has encouraged everybody to be an active citizen in the space and not be a spectator. I feel that sometimes when people express their viewpoints and the way he picks and chooses what to respond to and the manner in which he does them, frankly, does not help the discourse at all. There's a litany of issues, and I do not intend going into them, but I think Sweeney and Co have mentioned that. I was a bit mortified when listening to him when he tried to say that there was a conversation on free SHS, which was essentially a running campaign against the policy. And I disagree with him because I didn't think that was what the intention of your station as well as the sister stations were actually trying to achieve. I think it was a fair assessment. It was a fair to have, given that there have been challenges there are challenges with every policy, right? And so I never heard anybody categorically lambasting the government saying it was a visionless policy. Nobody said that. What people were essentially saying was that, look, the challenges are mounting. In fact, if we did hear one of the deputy ministers, finance, nominated, was, I think during her vetting, suggested that we needed to borrow more in order to make free SHS possible. It is in that spirit that people are having a conversation, suggesting that, look, maybe it's about time to open it up and allow okay, thank you. Well, so it's about time people also, the parents felt there was a need to also make a contribution. I think rather than go after the radio station, I would rather think that the president should be interested in the feedback that was given to the policy. So the radio station was just an amplifier. Well, as the president may believe that the radio stations that discuss this subject are example with the first, and negatively so. But I think these are conveyor belts essentially, expressing how people feel. And some of these issues that we are dealing with or talking about the portal side, again, maybe it's the terminology that seems to irk him a lot. Because it was coined during the era of, probably coined during the military era. The fact of the matter is that there are people who have experienced these things. And to the extent that the experiences are loud and they are expressing them, and their experiences find, comfort places within the citizen to express things. I think the least we can do is to just do an assessment and say, look, can we have a proper conversation about these things? It shouldn't be, and when the president gets the opportunity, the launch pad should not be used as a gate picking and choosing. In any case, we could have also spoken about the Kalakuda's attack as well. He didn't say that. Rather, he was gratifying and suggesting that he's giving enough ammunition and accessories to the police. Well, the end product is that the security services somehow become high-handed when they are dealing with persons they believe are the same, in the case of Kalakuda. So while you pick and choose what you want to hear or what you think you are doing, it's important that people also who feel differently about some of these actions have got to express themselves. And I think it is in the spirit of these that we can then move on as a country. As of the conversations about indices, our indices also speak volumes, really, and I think they are indicative of how things have become. I can understand when the president says, well, look at me. I'm a lifelong believer in media freedom. It's true. He does believe in it. I guess the challenge has to do with the very agencies or his assigned that he must also then believe in the cause. My worry is that he seems not bothered too much in ensuring that his assigned or these very agencies seems to have motivated and emboldened through resources who are going a particular way. He doesn't seem to be interested in dealing with them at all. If he were, if Mr. Zugu, I've forgotten his rank, so I wouldn't. If Mr. Zugu had been, dealt with at least, if action had been taken on Zugu, the moment he was identified as one of the rings around Yawaso Westwalk, rather than issue a white paper dismissing entirely the hard work of the Trade Commission, I mean, we wouldn't be here, right? And I guess there's a litany of these issues. His own campaign against Galamsey, as you realize, it was a nationwide campaign. We all supported it. Eventually, what happened? It is his own people who thwarted the effort. So when people begin to question the commitment of these latter-day, interventions, I don't think they are being very negative. I don't think that is the point at all. People are expressing questions and answering and answers that they want to hear. If people express that you said, well, during the pandemic, you gave freebies, and then we clashed on you, and that you were so caring. Then after the pandemic, one of your ministers was suggesting to us that the reasons why we need to pay taxes is because we enjoy these freebies, or people enjoy these freebies. And people then begin to question, well, if we knew there was no free lunch, why promise us one? I don't think when people question these things, they are being negative. But when people question the rationale behind, this whole idea of spending money in every constraint and not necessarily seeing the result, I don't think people are being negative at all. I think it's a discourse. And I suspect the best thing we can do as a government is to take these things in and then try to address them. As to what senior citizens from Jonah and Co would have said, I mean, these are careful observers. I would be more interested in trying to understand why senior citizens like Sanjena would speak the way he spoke, when he doesn't speak often. In fact, he doesn't actually speak at all. All of a sudden, it springs up in these litany of all these, should I call them, worrying concerns. I think worrying situations, I think it's important that the least we can do is to sit back and listen and address them. I certainly feel the pain of the president. He thinks he's doing a whole lot, and people are not recognizing it. But in fairness to him, his call on Ghanaians to be citizens and not spectators does not include praise singing at all. And I do not think that any government the government employs a lot of institutions to praise it itself. So anybody who, at the end of the day, is not within the structure of the public sector cannot be seen, and is not necessarily expected to be offering all the praises, should not be seen as an enemy. I think it's important that we do this, we have this conversation in nation building as a monolithic rather than see it as a divide and conquer.
But is it the situation that he is completely wrong? Because if you listen to him, for instance, he said there's a new line of reasoning which suggests that when people in government and or government policies are criticized and there is a defense of the people or policies, it is considered as intimidatory and leads to a culture of silence. These are his words.
Well, I'm sure he has a reason to say that. I mean, defending the position or defending the situation naturally, I mean, should not raise any eyebrow. I guess it's the way it is done. I mean, if you responded by basically telling people who talk about the Japan, for instance, that they are airheads and do not understand the transaction and do not understand what goes into this type of conversations, that's a different response. If your response to media freedom is that certain radio stations could be targeted and closed down, that certainly is not the perfect response. I don't think it is. If your response to a journalist who screams, even if he was doing so, unknowing to you, I mean, within the security sector, and is beaten to fall, I don't think that is the kind of response you want to say is a spirited response. You see, so the moment you keep going on that path, many persons will come up with a lot more examples to show you that it is not the way you respond, it is the way you respond that matters. It is not the fact that you are denied the right to respond. I think that is the issue that people are talking about. I can understand that, but I think it is the way it is done. So yeah.
All right, let me come back to Muhib so that we can move the conversation forward. And Muhib is the manager of expression at the Media Foundation for West Africa. Also on this particular topic is Alassane Suhini, who is the member of parliament for Tamale North. And Muhib, I want to ask this. Is he wrong in thinking that there is just too much negativity in the space? And Kojo Nkrumah also expressed this, where he felt that there's a lot of very one-sided agenda setting in the journalism that is being practiced today.
Can I take a back
No, you just spoke, Frank. Let Muhib speak.
Yeah. I mean, I feel a bit irritated listening to that, knowing what we collectively, I say we, in the CSO space and the media, and even the Nigerian Mohammed stuff. None of this compares to what Mahama suffered. I think it irritates me to the core when I hear that there's so much negativity. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. It's not true. Sorry.
Very upset, frankly.
I think I also disagree that there is so much negativity. I think it is the mindset that there is an agenda to undermine the government of the NPP with bad publicity and bad media, which is fueling the antagonism that we are seeing from members of this government and security agents against the media. Why would we say that there is a lot of negativity? I believe that of all the governments that we have had under the Fourth Republic, this government has had the most powerful firepower in terms of its presence in the media space. There's been a very robust presence of this government in the media space, and he himself has alluded to the fact that they make spirited response to allegations and criticisms that are made against the government. And that is the essence of democracy and media pluralism. We cannot all be singing the praises of the government. The government has its agencies and its information and communication mechanisms. And the press and civil society also have a duty to kind of keep the work of the president in focus, ask the right questions, and demand accountability on behalf of the citizens. So I think that it is about time the government really assessed itself and understood that there have also been too many unfortunate reactions from government when they are responding to these so-called negativities. We cannot attack or challenge the government about what it thinks. What we can demand of government is that it responds appropriately and in a manner that responds to our democratic culture, which is to credit each other with good faith and dialogue. The attacks on journalists that we have seen in this country over the years do not augur well. And I think it's about time the government accepted this and initiated an effort to get a rapprochement between it and the media and civil society, so we chart the way forward. But if there are negativities, they are entitled to feel so, but the response to the negativities have been quite unfortunate and catastrophic. As we speak, last week, about 2 weeks ago, there was an incident at Asankragwa where you had national security operatives attack a casino, virtually loot the casino, and a journalist who was reporting the incident to the divisional commander was pounced upon and beaten to a pulp. That is unfortunate. Again, we have the cases of the invasion of Ghana, the modern Ghana.com, which has still not yet been redressed. The invasion of modern Ghana.com was at the instance of the Minister for
National Security.
Yes, for national security. These journalists were detained on the premises of the national security and were punished. Now, it is a redress of these violations that would convince us that the government has an abhorrence to these attacks on press freedom. Then it would be easy for us to also look at where the media has gone wrong and then find a way of improving the situation. But in the midst of attacks on journalists, it will be difficult for us to accept that the media or civil society generally is being too negative, and that perhaps justifies the attacks on journalists. It will be like discussing the mode of dressing for females at a time when there is public outrage about repeated rape of females. That is not the time to talk about the mode of dressing. When the outrage is over, we can sit down and then see what we can do to better protect the victims. So this is really not the time to talk about media negativities. It is the time to accept that things have gone wrong as far as government's response and dealings with the media is concerned. And then we see where we can engage in dialogue and find a solution.
Okay, Muhib, thank you. Suhini.
Yes, Alfred.
Yes, Honorable Suhini, thank you. So, again, I guess I come back to you with the same question of the president says he's willing, there has to be a willingness for knowledge sharing. And that is perhaps what is lacking, in the sense that one side is willing to share, another side does not want to take. And when there's a response, then there are claims of, oh, we are being intimidated, oh, there's a culture of silence, and that if we're able to listen to each other more, perhaps this perception might disappear.
You know, Governor, I think the president says one thing and means another. Because, you see, when you create an atmosphere for information and knowledge sharing, knowledge is only imparted when you keep an open mind in that atmosphere. But when you assume that you are the be-it-all and the know-it-all, and so your information shouldn't be questioned and can't be questioned, then that is not an atmosphere that supports information and knowledge sharing. Then it becomes intimidating to anybody in that atmosphere that wishes to question any information that is shared in that atmosphere. So the president, yes, is missing the point that over the years, our democracy has been celebrated and highlighted because of its ability to, tolerate dissent views and also to share information and knowledge. We either disagree or agree with each other based on what is being discussed. But what we currently have is a situation where he is superintending over one part or one group of people who thinks that their knowledge or their information shared should be taken without question. And I'm saying that is a mindset of a dictator in the making, a despot in the making, and he better checks it. Look, in terms of defending oneself and one's policies, I don't think that this president has done it better than John Mahama did. I think the former president, John Mahama, was the most accessible and the most readily available to respond to criticisms of his administration. You were here in this country. He was always in the news and always willing to engage on issues that were of national importance or was, in the headlines. If you disagree with me, you can tell me. He was always on and ready to engage. In fact, some of his managers thought that he responded too much to too many things. But that was his character. But not once did anybody feel intimidated. Not once did any journalist feel that his responses and his attempt to defend himself amounted to a threat to their, freedoms. Not once. So the president cannot claim that their defense is intimidating the journalists of today, and so they target culture of silence. It is their way of doing the defending. It is the subtle threats. It is the clear, intolerance that is displayed. Because the former president defended his policies. In fact, I think he did it more readily and more expeditiously than the current president is doing. But he was never accused of intimidating or threatening or, reducing the freedoms that are there for journalists to practice. And when you talk of negativity, please, I agree with Franklin that sometimes it can be very aching. It can be very, very provocative. When you hear people in this administration who championed negativity to the highest, like we say in Ghana, nonsense degree, speak of negativity today. Even when a president went on a deserved leave to Dubai, he became known as Kofi Dubai. This president went to Tamale to urge us on Independence Day to promote domestic tourism in this country by visiting very interesting sites in Ghana. That was in 2018. Immediately he left Tamale, he landed in Accra, and with his extended family members went to Norway for leave. He is not called Mr. Norway. This country witnessed a DCE being sacked for asking who said Tria. A district chief executive was made to be sacked by the president because on a platform he asked who said Tria. Civil society, the media, the negativity around who said Tria led to the president sacking a DCE. What impudence, what arrogance, what corrupt practices haven't DCEs engaged under Nana Akufo-Addo and gone scot-free? A deputy minister for just daydreaming about making 1 million Ghana cedis. Daydreaming, not even committing the crime. The negativity around that daydream of a minister as against what ministers and presidential staffers are acquiring today, being revealed by lawsuits. So who are those talking about negativity today? Circle interchange, even before its construction, was, branded with negativity led by no other person than the president himself. And that is why the then president had to refer to him as a political quantity surveyor. Rich Hospital, the UGMs, the Terminal 3. These were projects. In fact, these are projects that are currently contributing to the economic growth of this country. But even before they were established and constructed, it was, branded with negativity by these same people who cry of negativity today. But even at the time that they did it, what is important is that nobody was afraid that culture of silence was returning. Even as the government then, led by the president and his appointees, defended itself and defended the decisions and defended the programs and policies, people were not intimidated. People didn't feel threatened. Their freedom to express themselves, was not under threat. And that is what the president must understand.
All right, Suhini, hold on for me. Let me just take a quick break. When we return, I'll take your messages and final words from Muhib Sahid, Manager of Expression at the Media Foundation for West Africa, Franklin Kujo, Suhini, and then we'll call it a day.
You wait for Euro 2020, Europe's grandest football championship with Europe's grandest players.
Oh, what a goal! Ronaldo, it's a second.
It's not about where it's played, but how it's played. And when it's played on a stage this big by players this intense, it's anyone's game. You wait for Euro 2020. Get and stay connected to DSTV to watch UEFA Euro 2020 on dedicated SuperSport channels.
A lawful wedded wife to having to hold from this day forward.
I do.
Drama saying na bit me ahwe. Ama weni age. For HD Plus, who feel. My HD Plus, nya nyonko papa ma wo HD TV. For star 879 hash for subscribe it. Na twa weni to feel say sia.
Welcome back, and a couple of messages on this matter, and then I'll just take final words from my panelists, and then we will wrap up. Utu from Abeka says the biggest problem we have is journalists defending government when people are criticizing government for intolerance of free speech. Okay, Kofi from Tema says the problem with journalists is that they are very critical of governments, but when they are criticized by governments, then they take such criticism as an attack on freedom of speech. It's as if journalists have all the right to criticize, but nobody has the right to criticize journalists or people in the media. Moses from Dansoman says, considering the abuse and brutality under Nanado's government, some journalists are even charitable. As for free SHS, the least said about it, the better. And Muhib, I come back to you with this because of the work you do at the Media Foundation for West Africa, especially as you study expression. And two of the messages that I have basically summarize this. A lot of people seem to think that journalists are very quick to dish out, but don't want or are not tolerant of rebuttal of any form. Muhib. Muhib, did you hear me? Seem to have a problem. Let me just see. Let me just talk to Franklin, then I'll come back to Suhini. Franklin.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sure you heard the question, and I was saying that is a feeling I get through, even just going through my message board. A lot of people seem to think that journalists are simply not also accommodating of rebuttals or rejoinders.
You know, again, I said a while back that it is not it is the manner in which the rejoinders or the rebuttals are made which generates further controversy or, further conversations about the original issues. So I don't think journalists in general are against being criticized. I don't think I've heard that. Of course, there are different grades of journalists by the way. There are some that obviously, I don't think I don't know whether to describe them as personal journalists or citizen journalism or whatever. But the professional journalists, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure most of them are saying that they don't deserve to be criticized. You do deserve to be criticized. I think what is being explained or what is being discussed is the manner in which the responses have come. I mean, if a journalist goes to take a screenshot of a place and you don't like it, I mean, there are rules against doing that. I don't think it's important to beat up journalists. That's not a response. That's an assault. You understand? Or if you take the journalist to the columnizing his company or his next Kiffen, the responses are not proportionate to whatever may have generated it. I must admit, there may be one or two incidents where a journalist may have felt that, well, the response that was dished out was not proper and probably goes ahead and then mounts a spirited defense as well. But in most of the cases we are discussing, is it truly the case that the journalists involved have said that they are above reproach? I don't think that is what is being said at all. So I think we should be careful how we categorize the conversation and make it look as if people are being unnecessarily defensive. I don't think that is the point. If I get any publication, and of course there are instances where things have been said about me that I felt were not particularly right, and I've taken the necessary action against those perceived journalists And they have either apologized or retracted the story, or probably amended the story. I don't go ahead to look out for them or, encourage people to go and get them beaten and all sort of things. I don't think that is the way to go. I think when you have civil conversations on the City Breakfast Show and the responses come, you deal with them appropriately. I don't think you have gone beyond board and have said that you are not, you do not need to be criticized. I don't think that's what is being suggested here at all.
All right then, thank you. Suini, same question to you.
Well, Prophet, I am a journalist at heart. But even that, I have on many occasions criticized myself and some of our colleagues when it comes to our level of tolerance, of dissent. So it is not an issue I will say does not exist. It is one that as journalists and as media houses, we need to work on better. We tend to, survive on our integrity. And so when our position is questioned, it tends to threaten the influence that we also have on our listeners and our viewers. And so sometimes the need to defend that can push one into overdrive. But a good journalist knows how to check those impulses. And a good media house is able to do so and to check those impulses. I have said, for example, to some colleagues that, look, it's only a microphone or a pen and a pad that you have and not a gun. So you don't expect every body to stand attention because you are holding a microphone and do as you bid. But having said this, our journalists have lived through many governments. At least in the Fourth Republic, we have witnessed Rawlings, we have witnessed President Kufuor, we have witnessed President Mills, we have witnessed President Mahama, and now Nana Akufo-Addo. And this attitude that I admit exists among journalists has been there, in all these regimes or during all these regimes. And so it's not a new thing that confronts this government. It is only the way this government is dealing with that very small fraction of journalists who are like that, and the very good ones who are in the majority, who are simply, committed to practicing journalism as the ethics dictate, but are unable to do so because of the level of intolerance, the level of threats on their lives, and in some cases, even the execution that we have seen. So we cannot compare, the problem of some journalists not tolerating dissenting views or accommodating criticism enough with what is currently happening. What is currently happening is, and as revealed by the president's own words, is being goaded and coached and directed at the presidency by His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo himself, who thinks that every criticism of his regime or policy of the regime amounts to a campaign against him or his regime or that policy. And once you determine somebody to be against something, the person is tagged an opponent. And for some, fair or foul, an opponent should be dealt with. And so for me, this latest response of the president brings to home the reality of the threats against media freedoms in this country, and the fact that some of the things that have been done against journalists and media houses, if you had doubts that they were done
behind the president or on his blind side, I think his latest position and comments should erase any such doubts. He believes that when you criticize him, you are waging a campaign against him. When you criticize his decision, you are waging a campaign against that decision. If you criticize a policy, you are waging a campaign against that policy. And so those who wish him well and sees that he does no wrong are at liberty. Even they are allowed to be overzealous in dealing with you as an opponent or as an against person, as it is colloquially said in this country. So the two should not be confused with each other. Yes, there's an issue of journalists also sometimes acting arrogantly as if to suggest that they know it all and they are beyond reproach. That issue has always been with us. But what is currently happening is that those and majority of the very good journalists all feel at risk and all feel their freedoms to express themselves have been threatened. And it is as a result of the conduct and leadership that is being provided by Nana Akufo-Addo and Dr. Bawumia. And I think it is a sad spectacle, especially given, the past record of the president. It is so ironic that as president, Ghana is recording very poor performance on the, media freedom table worldwide and in Africa, and also on the human rights front. It is quite ironic and very, very disappointing.
Thank you very much, Al-Hassan Suini, Member of Parliament for Tamale North. Just two quick messages to wrap up the program. Joseph from Kwabinya says, Godfrey, if there's a culture of silence in Ghana, the parliamentarian program would not have had the opportunity to speak. Thanks be to God, everyone can speak freely. Martin Luther from Labondi says, it seems so soon we have forgotten as a country the situation we were in before the MP took over from the incompetent NDC. The recent social and economic challenges are not only peculiar to Ghana, but are global due to the COVID-19 and its aftermath. Notwithstanding the various social intervention programs the government implemented and still are to mitigate the impact on the country, has led to some citizens and the media making reckless comments. Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Martin Luther from Laboni. That is how we'll end the program. My name is Godfrey.
Maybe just a response to the first texter. Nana Akufo-Addo became the champion of media freedoms under a so-called culture of silence. So it does not mean that under culture of silence, people cannot speak. Nana Addo was speaking, and that's how he became one of the champions of media freedoms under a so-called culture of silence. So there can be culture of silence and we will still be able to speak.
Have a good weekend.